3 years ago, I was making $60,000 writing code in a cubicle. Last year, I cleared 640,000. Same skills, same industry. But I figured out something that most developers completely miss about how money actually works in tech. You've probably heard the advice: learn more frameworks, build side projects, contribute to open source, grind leak code until your fingers bleed. I did all of that. And you know what happened? My salary went up 12%. 12%. I could have gotten that by just switching jobs normally. The real breakthrough came when I stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like a business. Not by starting a company or going freelance. By understanding that every company views engineering talent as either a cost center or a profit multiplier. And once you know which one you are, everything changes. Most developers are stuck in cost center mode without even realizing it. You show up, write the code someone tells you to write, attend the meetings, submit your pull requests. You're executing someone else's vision, replaceable, fungible. The company looks at your salary and thinks about how much cheaper they could get someone overseas to do the same thing. I was that developer, mid-level engineer at a company that sold marketing software. Decent pay, good benefits, comfortable. My manager would tell me I was doing great work. Then I'd get a 3% raise that didn't even match inflation. Something wasn't adding up. Then I talked to a guy who made 4 times what I made. Same years of experience. Similar technical background. He wasn't smarter than me. Honestly, his code was pretty mediocre, but he had something I didn't. He worked on revenue. Every feature he built directly generated money for the company. He could point to a dashboard and say, "This thing I made brought in $2 million this quarter." When he asked for a raise, he wasn't negotiating based on market rates or his years of experience. He was showing ROI, return on investment. His salary was a rounding error compared to what he made the company. That's when it clicked. I was in the wrong part of the code base. I was building internal tools and maintaining legacy systems. Important work, sure, but invisible. Nobody looked at the admin panel I spent 3 months optimizing and thought about profit. They thought about cost. So I moved. Not to a different company initially, to a different team, the growth team, the people responsible for turning users into paying customers. Suddenly, every line of code I wrote had a number attached to it. This A/B test increased conversions by 0.3%. That's $17,000 a month. This onboarding flow reduced churn by 2%. That's $100,000 annually. 6 months later, I asked for a raise. Not a standard cost of living adjustment, a 40% increase. My manager looked uncomfortable, started talking about budget constraints and salary bands. Then I showed him the spreadsheet, everything I'd shipped in the last 6 months and its impact on revenue. The number was substantial. Paying me an extra $30,000 meant the company still netted hundreds of thousands from my work. I got the raise, but more importantly, I understood the game now. Companies don't pay you based on how hard you work or how skilled you are. They pay you based on how expensive it would be to lose you versus how much value you create. That realization led to 3 more strategic moves over the next 2 years. Each time, I made sure I was working on things that directly impacted the company's most important metrics: revenue, user growth, retention, the stuff that CEOs talk about in board meetings. But there's a darker side to this that nobody talks about, a trap that even experienced developers fall into. Because once you understand how to position yourself as a profit center, you might be tempted to take it too far, to game the system instead of actually creating value. I almost made that mistake. And what happened next taught me the difference between optimizing for salary and optimizing for genuine impact. That distinction matters more than you'd think. I started chasing metrics instead of outcomes, focused on shipping features that would make dashboards look good rather than actually solving user problems. Built things that technically increased engagement but made the product worse. You can manipulate numbers pretty easily if that's your only goal. Add a notification that doesn't need to exist. Create artificial urgency in the UI. dark patterns that boost short-term metrics while eroding trust. I shipped a feature that increased daily active users by 8%. Looked incredible in the weekly review. My manager loved it. The CEO mentioned it in an all-hands meeting. 3 months later, user satisfaction scores dropped. Support tickets increased. People were opening the app more often, sure, but they were frustrated. The feature I built interrupted their workflow to show them things they didn't care about. I'd optimized for the wrong thing. Created vanity metrics instead of value. That's when I learned the most important lesson about making money in tech. Short-term thinking gets you short-term gains. You can game your way to one good raise, maybe two, but eventually, people notice. Your reputation becomes that person who ships flashy stuff that breaks later. Companies stop trusting you with important projects. You get stuck working on surface-level features while someone else builds the infrastructure that actually matters. The real money, the lasting kind, comes from developing judgment, knowing which problems are worth solving, understanding the difference between a metric and a goal, recognizing when leadership is asking for the wrong thing, and having the skill to redirect them toward what actually works. That's rare. That's valuable. That's what makes you irreplaceable. I spent the next year fixing my approach, stopped looking at dashboards first, started talking to users instead, watched session recordings, read support tickets, joined sales calls, found the actual problems that hurt the business. Then I'd look at metrics to validate solutions, not to generate ideas. Revenue became a lagging indicator of whether I'd built something useful, not the primary driver of what I built. Counterintuitively, this made me more valuable. My features had staying power. They didn't need constant maintenance or create downstream problems. Leadership started pulling me into strategy conversations because I understood the why behind the what. That's when the real money showed up. Not from asking for raises anymore. From getting recruited. Companies don't just want developers who can code. They want people who understand the business, who can translate between technical constraints and business objectives, who ship things that matter. When recruiters reached out, I didn't talk about my skills with React or Python. I talked about outcomes, how I reduced customer acquisition costs by 30%, how I increased lifetime value, how I identified a product gap that opened a new market segment. Those conversations led to offers that weren't just higher. They were in different categories entirely. Equity that actually meant something. Roles with real influence over product direction. The kind of positions where your technical decisions shape company strategy. But none of that would have happened if I'd kept optimizing for metrics instead of impact. If I'd stayed focused on gaming the system rather than creating genuine value. The difference seems subtle. Both approaches involve working on revenue-critical projects. Both require understanding business fundamentals. But one builds a career, the other builds a house of cards. So yeah, work on things that make money. Position yourself near revenue. Understand the business model. Make sure leadership can quantify your impact. That's all true and necessary. Just don't forget that the numbers are supposed to represent real value. They're a measurement tool, not the destination. Create actual impact first. The metrics and the money follow naturally after that. Skip that step, and you're just building an impressive resume for a career that eventually stalls out. That's the real difference between developers who cap out at senior engineer and those who end up leading entire departments or starting their own companies. I went from 60,000 to over 600,000 by understanding one thing. Your salary isn't determined by your coding ability. It's determined by how close you are to the money and whether you're creating real value or just impressive-looking metrics. Choose the right problems to solve, stay honest about impact, and the compensation takes care of itself.